Om Shanti to everyone at Inner Space and all of you who are joining on Zoom and Facebook and different places. Embracing struggle and leveraging failure. These are probably not necessarily the topics that you want to think about or that you're used to think about, but they're important because we have a word in spiritual practice of Raj Yoga, and that word is tapasya. It's a word from India, tapasya, and it means to strive. Sometimes we interpret that word as meaning practicing intense meditation, and that is definitely part of it, because whatever our circumstance is, very often there are aspects of it which are difficult and which we don't understand, and we will try to position ourselves vis-a-vis our situation, thinking, okay, this is the right position. But I don't know if you've ever had the feeling that you're not really sure whether your angle on reality is the best one or the right one, and yet that's the one you have. And if you want to really shift from your current state with all of its limitations and arrive at an angle on reality, the social reality that we are in, from a different angle, then you are operating a bit blindly, and it is a struggle because you are unsure. When you have very fixed ideas, then they may or may not be right, but because they're so fixed, you just go bludgeoning your way through with that particular angle on reality until things really fall apart and you get a really big sort of shock, or everything collapses and then you have to rethink. We are living in very chaotic times, very disturbed, unclear times where it's just really strange. And I think just to be topical, the circumstances of the last couple of days where the President of the United States was accused by a large number of people in high places of inciting insurrection against the country. And this is so strange because you see a country which is really divided, and you see a lot of people who are having a very fixed idea about what's real, which actually isn't real. And then you have other people whose idea about reality, I think, is more connected with what is real. And then these two communities are huge, and they are at loggerheads with each other. And we see this in many different areas. So I think the struggle that I want to talk about today, that we need to embrace, is really the struggle to figure out for the self what is the angle on reality that I need to adopt, which is real, which is right, and which may be different from the angle that I grew up with and that I figured out in my own thinking. Perhaps my personal ethical policy that I have worked out through my whole life is not exactly quite right. Perhaps my perception of people is biased, and the circumstances that we're in are demanding that we rethink all of this. Now for me, I feel that I'm at a great advantage because I've had the opportunity to study matters of spirituality and to practice meditation and so on for 45 years. So I have access to a lot of different views about what reality is. And then you take all of these, and with that you formulate your personal angle. But circumstances are such that they tend to challenge your assessment, and eventually you have to let go of how you thought everything is, and then you're really in struggle because you have to really think, okay, what is my identity? Identity is a big issue. I think most people think about their identity in terms of their nationality, but we live in a very pluralistic society and you have divided loyalties. You may be living in Europe, but your roots are in Africa or Australia or America or the Middle East or India or China. And so you carry with yourself your roots, and then you try and put roots in another place which maybe doesn't understand you, doesn't like you, and so you have to adopt a way that allows you to fit in and integrate, but yet you find yourself in the struggle that on the one hand you want to be part of where you are, and on the other hand you don't want to deny what you are in terms of how your being is constructed on the basis of your traditions, your background, your culture, your very, very subtle attributes of your identity that that make you think of yourself as fundamentally a good person. And if you have to go against that in order to advance in a new society or a new community or a new environment, this puts you in an ethical dilemma, which is very uncomfortable. And so there is this struggle to figure out what is the right way to make a balance and integrate all the different elements of your struggle so that you actually arrive at a solution where everything is, what you can say, is in order. One of the words that we use when we're in struggle is should, ought, ought not, has to, must, these modal verbs. So you find yourself in a situation and you make assumptions about that situation. Maybe you come into a world where there are many words used that correspond to that word. Like if you go into a spiritual community, there are words about spirituality like love and peace and cooperation and harmony and all of that. So you say in good faith, okay, I will adopt these values, they correspond to who I am, and I will assume that the people who are talking about these values are also embodying them. And then you carry on and you find that what people say and what they do is not the same. And it is a big question when you hear this expression, walk your talk. Because everyone has some degree of double standards. To some degree it is understandable or acceptable, but there's some kind of invisible line which, when it gets crossed, then it creates a lot of disturbance in someone who is observing that. So you're in an environment where everyone talks about love and peace and harmony and integrity, and your interpretation of those words is yours, and the people that you're interacting with, they're using the same words, but they define them and interpret them differently, and so you find yourself in a position of struggle, and you experience that they do not respect who you are, they do not understand you, they do not appreciate your contribution, and they are basically in a competition where, as far as possible, they would like to gain the upper hand, and you are out of the running as far as possible, because the world we live in is highly competitive. Even then, people say, no, we should be cooperative and nice to each other and all of that. But the double standards come in and you find yourself in a struggle. If you are at the losing end of the game, you are very unhappy about this. And this is where the question of the second part of our discussion today comes in, leveraging failure. Because when you approach your situation in good faith and you assume that the others around you are also acting in good faith, and that you don't question these assumptions, and then all of a sudden things go very differently from how you expect, and then you find yourself in loss, rejected, maybe character assassination is going on, you are being described as not okay as a person, and you feel that this is injustice, it is unfair, it is illegitimate authority put against you, and you are in a position where you feel you failed. Everything went against you. You lost. And when you look at this from the angle of spirituality, you get something quite interesting, which I would like to put before you, because I've used this. I think there's no single person who experiences success at every step and never any kind of failure. I don't think there's anybody like that. But some people experience more failure, or they're more sensitive to their failure, and so leveraging that failure and turning that failure to your advantage is something that is possible, definitely very desirable, and there are also some methods and techniques and approaches that are very helpful for this. So in a spiritual practice, we talk about the idea of being a spiritual warrior. We talk about the war against negativity and this sort of idea, which is quite classic, the war between the dark forces and the light forces. And there's always this idea that no matter how big the struggle is, it's always the forces of light, the forces of goodness, which will win. And then all of a sudden you find yourself, I'm the good person, but the bad people are winning and I'm losing. So how do I work with this? How do I use this to my advantage? I think it's safe to say that every single person has some degree of ego. And ego is something we talk about a lot in spirituality. And the idea is to become free from ego, but the difficulty is to define what exactly this ego is. Now, sometimes we talk about it as false ego. And so we mean that there is a true sense of identity where you're in your personal spiritual power, you are feeling completely in your self-respect, and you are fine. I think the practice that I'm particularly interested in the moment is, what does it take to be absolutely real, absolutely in your power, but with no protection at all. So this ego is a form of protection that you bring up whenever you are challenged or attacked in social situations, business situations, whatever. So when we find ourselves in a situation of struggle, and that there is a competition going on where we think there shouldn't be, that some injustice is going on which we think is not right, and so on, and we are attacked by it, you feel attacked, so you will definitely bring up your ego mask, and that could be an attitude of righteous indignation. It could be an attitude of, those people are doing something unlawful, they ought to be punished for it, and somebody should do something about it, and somebody should stop it. But in spirituality we say, okay, all of that may well be true, but it's not practical, because what we want to be done is not going to get done. And so we will say, okay, this is a test for me. And what I need to do is figure out, and this is where embracing struggle is involved. It is a struggle to really deeply figure out, what is it about me that has got this whole thing wrong? And what do I need to do to shift, to reset myself, so that I understand clearly what the deal is, and that I adopt an angle of approach which is appropriate, effective, and suitable, and give up my other old way, because the old way is ineffective, it's not right, it's nothing to do with the situation, and it's not who I am. But there is a struggle involved in doing that, because you feel as though you're in completely alien territory, you're blind, you don't know your way around, and so you have to wing it. And usually when you wing things, it doesn't go very well. So there is a struggle, it's an internal struggle to sit with yourself and really figure out, nobody will tell you, nobody will help you, to sit there and figure out what is going on here. What is the lesson for me? What is it that I am blind about? What is it that I'm not seeing? And the thing that will be the most helpful of all to actually get us through this struggle is failure. And so we think in spiritual practice, we think of failure as something really positive. But most people, they have fear of failure. And when they do experience failure, they really feel bad, and they want to avoid and blame and all of that. But very few people think of failure in such a positive way that they can actually sit with it and learn from it, and turn that failure into the very thing that carries you from your condition where you are really not doing things right, to a place where you're awake, you're aware, you've got it, you understood the message, you do not have resentment at all, you embrace the failure, and you use the failure to your advantage, And this requires a lot of inner strength. So it's a bit of a paradox, because the reason you fail is because you don't have the inner strength, and yet if you are willing to go through it and accept it and endure the pain that goes with it, the shame, the embarrassment, the exposure, then you can transcend the problem and shift yourself to a personal evolution, a spiritual transcendence, you can almost say. And once you see it, well, you're not blind anymore. And the you that you used to be doesn't exist anymore, because you become someone else by seeing clearly. And this can happen quite rapidly. Of course, this kind of test will have to happen again and again to make sure that you're in your new position, your new sense of self, with your new angle on reality, and you do not buy into the propaganda. I'm calling it propaganda with a reason. The propaganda that people who talk about words like integrity and purity and honor and nobility and so on will not necessarily live that way. And very often even these words will be used as a smokescreen while somebody is doing something for their own personal advantage and trying to get you to be naive, which is not a virtue. So you naively buy into this propaganda, and then you get caught out and you get taken down, and you say, what happened? You know, how is this possible? All these people who I thought were good are really bad, and what's going on? But it's all about growing up, and sometimes people grow up at the right age, but a lot of people grow up really late. But anyway, better late than never. And we have to understand that trusting someone should not be done just like that. Trust is built over a long period of time, and you have to test people, you have to look at what they're doing and see if it is consistent, if it is coherent, and you need to understand the signs that when somebody is conning you, when somebody is trying to pull the wool over your eyes and get you to fall into their trap so that they come out on top and you lose out. This is, in a way, the law of the jungle. Maybe we think, oh, we should be really civilized and there shouldn't be any law of the jungle. But the thing is this, that if you want to be a person of integrity, nobility, and all of these things, you must expect that others will not be like that. And if you assume that everybody is the way you feel that you are, you may be under an illusion about yourself, because you don't have what it takes to maintain that under attack. And you may be very deluded about other people's motivations. And so for this you need a very good life experience. Life experience is second to none, you know. Good things, bad things, success, failure, all of that. It says in the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, that we need to be in a state of equilibrium in regard to success and failure and being honored and dishonored and recognized and not recognized, and things going well and things going badly. We have to practice equilibrium, and if we don't get any tests, How are we going to practice equilibrium? How are we going to prove that we have something if we haven't gone through test after test after test? And so all of these tests are there to oblige us to step up and to be real, to understand the details of the reality of the world. And we cannot be conspiracy theorists, that is also totally unreal. We cannot be idealists, that is completely impractical. We have to be realist, we have to be strong, we have to be noble and have our own personal ethical policy, and above all, we need to have the personal inner power to be able to manage when people get the better of us, and to immediately let go of any kind of negative feelings and get on with understanding what is the lesson here, what do I need to do so that I am refining my game, as it were. This is a game. It is a very intense competition, and we need to be competent, and all of our failures are designed to refine our way of handling all the things that are happening to us. And if we don't use our failures to our advantage, then we haven't understood the purpose of failure. So in spirituality, we look at things pretty differently from the way reality is usually presented to kids in school or in different religions or whatever. We have to be steely real. And the purpose of life is to become a competent, quality human being with resilience, with a willingness to build capacity at every step. It's all about relationships, and we cannot have an ideal relationship with everyone on earth, but we need to understand ourselves, we need to understand the people that we interact with, and we need to become competent in working out how to relate with people who do not have our best interests in mind, so that you do take care of yourself, but you are able to maintain cordial relationships, and that you really become the master of the scenes. We look at things as different scenes, like in a movie, all these different scenes, and you have to play the scene, whatever it is, but play it well. And there may be tension, there may be danger, there may be all sorts of things, but you have to play the scene well. And if you fail, you go back, re-look at the scene in your mind, play it back, and practice. Okay, what did I do that was naive? What did I do that was incompetent? And learn from it to raise your level of capacity. And then you can be really genuine, real, and not under any illusions, not a deluded type of person. And I think ultimately you can be in this stage where you are really strong and unprotected. Unprotected is good because that means you're not going to operate behind any ego mask. You can be yourself, totally and completely, absolutely open, vulnerable, but at the same time invulnerable, because you are so strong, because you have taken advantage of all these lessons of life. So I will stop there and let us have a few moments of meditation to think about these things. Think of yourself as a pure, peaceful, loving powerful and blissful being of light. This is your identity. Many people will try to pull you away from that sense of self, but practice. This is what I am. This is who I am. And from this place, I come into action through my body and the different scenes. And I'm okay with whatever it is. I am connected with the divine source. I take time to take power into myself. I look after my being. And I go into action, circumstances, fearlessly, and look at everything like a divine comedy. Thank you. Om Shanti.
Thank you, Denise. That was, I really wasn't expecting that. It was very insightful. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a couple of questions that have come through, so let me start with those. The first question is, how do you not buy into the propaganda, as you call it, when you feel like a failure due to making mistakes and feel like other people are just looking at you as a failure and holding your past against you by bringing it up again and again?
Well, what you have to do is be absolutely focused on the now. And maybe other people look at me as a failure, but that is not my problem, that's their problem. Do not make it your problem. And remind yourself again and again that the way other people project onto you, it doesn't mean that you have to accept that. You are not somebody's movie screen for them to project whatever they want. You are yourself, and you express who you are, whether they like it or not is too bad. And you have to have courage for that, because you have been trained by this, what I call propaganda, for your whole life. You know, you have been trained that your existence is determined and decided by the other people around you. They will tell you who you are, and they've been doing that for your whole life. And all of a sudden you get the idea that that is a big lie, and that who you are is who you are. And what they want to project onto you is not who you are, and there is nothing to say that you have to accept it except your conditioning. And you've had social conditioning for your whole life, so the big struggle that we have to embrace is to say no to all of those messages. And I am not a failure. And I decide I'm not a failure. If somebody decides I'm a failure, it doesn't mean that I'm not a failure. It's just that they are putting me at an unfair disadvantage, and I'm buying into it. But you have to get it. You have to see that this is just part of the sort of the unspoken propaganda that is spoken very clearly. But the message, you know, like good people, they're obviously good people, and other people will know they're good people. And if you're a good person, everybody will call you a good person. That means you have to be compliant and basically somebody else's slave. That's not okay. You cannot go for that. So the real struggle to do this happens, I think, when you have failed badly enough that you say, wait a minute, what is this? I'm not going to buy into this anymore. I have been so stupid and now I'm awake, and don't go to sleep again,
The next question is, I often feel overwhelmed and there's fear of failure. And because of this, I end up avoiding certain situations. How can I better deal with this sense of feeling overwhelmed and the fear of failure?
Well, I think, again, this fear of failure, we've been trained to have fear of failure. In a competitive world, the best way to compete effectively is to make everybody else believe that they're a failure. And then I do really well. But, feeling overwhelmed, it's also an attitude. You use this self-talk, I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to do the other, and it's all too much, right? So in spirituality, we have something called the power to face. And there are many powers that we learn about. This is one of them. And I remember one year, many years ago, I thought, self, I need to spend a whole year just on this power, because if I don't face things because I can't, because I don't have the power or whatever it is, I must get it. So I dedicated a whole year, I can't remember which year it was, somewhere in the 80s I think it was, when I was living in America. And it was just really good to dedicate this time to doing this. And when you decide that you're going to achieve something, there will be plenty of opposition and obstacles. This is normal. But what also happens is, if you decide, okay, I choose to acquire the power to face, then all the things that you can't face will come up. Everything will come up. And this is your training, because you have invoked it. You've said to the divine intelligence, this is what I want to do. And then the divine intelligence will say, okay, let me help you. I'm going to give you all kinds of trouble so that you can get lots of practice, and then you get good at it. And so we just have to give up being weak, because we're not weak. We have, agreed to be weak in the name of being good, and that is what I call propaganda. That's not true. That is fake news, you can say. And we have to come into our power and consolidate our power and say, yes, I can.
This divine intelligence that you're referring to, really, does this intelligence have to put us through things?
Well, there are a lot of TV programs about martial arts and, people getting superpowers, and Superwoman and Superman and Spider-Man and all these things, And there is something in the human psyche which says that I need to be more powerful than I am, more competent than I am. I have to get to that point. But if you train in the martial arts, for example, your teacher will throw you on the floor and throw you off a parapet as often as possible, so that you learn to protect yourself and get your skills. So I think the divine intelligence sometimes does this too. And especially if you invoke it and you say, I want to be able to be who I really am. I want to be in my power at any cost. And then the divine intelligence will say, okay, let's go. And you say, whoa, wait a minute. And he said, no, it's too late, let's go. And you're on your way. And I think you feel really fulfilled by the end of it. It doesn't mean it's an easy road, but you know, when I first came to know about Raj Yoga many, many years ago, I heard that it was the most difficult thing you could possibly do, more difficult than climbing Mount Everest. And when I heard that, I said, this is for me.
Really?
Yeah, because I said, if it's easy, it's not worth it. You know, you put in this much time and energy, it will be difficult, but what you get out of being willing to do something that's difficult and stick with it and really get through all the problems, then you get this sense of accomplishment, this sense of achievement, and this is what is a big ingredient to the state of fulfillment, which is, I think, the purpose of life.
Here's another question. How can I encourage my 20-year-old son not to be so trusting and be taken in by people who are not as they seem, without wanting to appear a cynical and out-of-touch negative parent? Or has he got to learn this for himself the hard way without interference?
Well, there's nothing like learning the hard way. I don't think anybody learns it the easy way, so that's definitely there. But what I would suggest is there are many things, many books, many films, many things that are out there, especially easily available on the internet, that describe these things. You know, if you just read the classics like Dickens and Victor Hugo and some of these people who were writing about the difficulties in society that people were facing, see the movie Les Miserables or whatever, you really see what this is all about. And I think you have to be educated in the realities of life. And this is what I think the humanities, literature, art, film is all about. And although nowadays everybody's into science and, you know, learning education so that you can make money, but this other aspect, philosophy and literature, has fallen by the wayside. And because of that, people are unaware of some of these realities that the writers have put in front of us, and the people who make films have put in front of us, that this is a reality of life. Now look at it, you know, and don't be naive.
When someone has done you wrong, how do you keep good relations with that person and emotionally get over it so you can keep that relationship positive?
Well, first of all, you need to see there are different categories of someone doing you wrong. And somebody might do something which attacks your ego, and you will feel that they did you wrong, but actually they did something good for you. There may be someone who does something really bad and is coming from a place that is not out of integrity. You don't want that person in your life anyway. So, you know, I don't think we need large numbers of friends like Facebook or whatever. No, 6 or 7 really good people in our life, that's good. And you build trust and you work through, like, you know, the most difficult thing is to sustain a marriage and children and parents and aunts and uncles and cousins and all of that, because there are so many problems in relationships with your relatives. And working through these things, once you've decided to make your life with someone and you recognize that this is a person of value, everybody has their good side and their bad side, no doubt. But if you decide, okay, I choose to work through this relationship because it is the greatest learning of all to work through a relationship and develop that, but you need to be very discerning, and you need to be a good judge of character and then proceed. And in my life, I have some incredibly good friends, but a good friendship always is a bumpy ride, because otherwise you just avoid confronting things that need to be confronted, and then it never gets sorted out. So one needs to be prepared to go through arguments and prepared to challenge people. And there are so many people who are afraid of this because they're just not educated that this is a good thing to do. They're educated that everything has to be nicey, sugar and spicy, which it isn't. And that's again part of that, wrong propaganda. But it keeps people weak, and that's not good.
The next question. I'd like to be more open and vulnerable in my relationships, but I feel I come across as weak to other people when I start to share. However, I feel too uncomfortable to show my weaknesses with them. So obviously to others, feelings that may at some time use information against me. So they're going to take my feelings and expressions and use it against me. How can I overcome this and become more fearless in a real way, without feeling that I'm losing my dignity?
I think, again, it's a matter of discernment. I don't think it's necessary to be totally open with everyone, anywhere, on the street. No. This is why you have close personal friends, that you can be vulnerable with them, because they're your friends, so they will not take unfair advantage of it. And I think that a culture has arisen where everybody has to be all open about everything, and then it all goes wrong and this and that. And that's because people are not discerning, they're not discriminating about the right place, the right time, the right people with which to open up. And then there are other people who are just totally closed down to anything and everyone, And so there's all sorts of problems that people have just being in interpersonal relationships. And I think a lot of it is because for the last 50 years or so, everything has been about how to be materialistically advantaged. And so all the relationship skills got put on the back burner, and people didn't really learn. And so therefore there's an underdevelopment of these skills. And so we now find ourselves needing to develop those, and this is a high priority. So it's very good to open up this discussion and talk about it and be real about it. Yeah. Thank you.
Denise, there have been so many people who have said thank you for sharing your wisdom, your insights. And from outside Inner Space, we'd like to say thank you for making the time.